first of all, thanks for you guys for showing up. This is super exciting. Hopefully it'll be the first of several entrepreneurship targeted events that ASU will be sponsoring for the foreseeable future. Just to give you guys a sense of what we're doing and why we're trying to do it. HBS over the last few years, as you guys have known, has invested more time and resources in helping people actually pursue entrepreneurship in the various forms that takes. And I want to make sure, and I think ASU wants to make sure, that communities of color are participating in that, are actually integrated into that ecosystem, and that we have a forum to actually talk and discuss about the things that are unique to our community, especially when it comes to the challenges we face, because most of the time those are the main impediments to people either starting or be successful in scaling businesses. So that being said, I'm going to introduce Aaron Gray, who is HBS 09. I've known Aaron going on 10 years now. He's been as passionate about entrepreneurship when I met him as he is today. But he's doing a lot of interesting things. So I think kind of when we think about what the goal of this event is, it's one, talk a little bit about what are the main impediments to entrepreneurship within our community. Two, Aaron getting to talk a little bit about what he's done to address that as an issue. And then three, how does that actually impact what we're doing here at HBS, and how can we participate in that process. So with that said, Aaron, you want to take it?
Thanks, Vernon. I really appreciate that. And I want to say thank you to everybody for taking time out of your, as I know, firsthand, very busy schedules at HBS to come and hear me out. And I know, people have some commitments, they may have to leave early, so I'm not offended if you do. But thank you for at least spending a little bit of time to learn about, kind of what our organization sees as challenges for entrepreneurship in underserved communities and what the Legacy Movement is trying to do about it. But first, a little bit on my background. Name's Aaron Gray, as he stated, founder of the Legacy Movement. I actually started my career in investment banking. Grew up in Chicago, grew up on the South Side, went to Florida A&M undergrad, studied finance, and then I also started my career in finance at Goldman Sachs doing technology and investment banking. After 2 years in New York, like most people, I decided to look at other opportunities, and then I pursued a technology position at a venture-backed startup called Fandango. They sold movie tickets online, and so I worked in business development and business intelligence for 2 years, learned a lot about venture capital, what that world was like, how they funded companies, got a chance to work with some top-notch VCs at Accretive Technology and Technology Crossover Ventures. And then we ultimately sold the company to Comcast before I left to go to HBS. And prior to going to HBS, I actually worked in venture capital at Graycroft Partners as a venture capital associate. And Graycroft Partners focused on consumer internet startups, digital media, and also mobile startups. So saw a lot in terms of technology and startups, and learned a lot about entrepreneurship, kind of working in those roles post-B school. And kind of when I got to HBS in '07, thought, I want to be a VC, I want to invest in companies and eventually start my own. And as you guys know, in 2007, the world blew up and changed for everyone. And so, my passion to do venture capital, while it was great, wasn't enough to help me secure a position. So I wasn't successful in doing that, and it was really tough to get a job working in startups as well. And so it kind of sparked my, thinking about, well, maybe I should be trying to get a job. Maybe I should kind of jump out there and do entrepreneurship now. But wasn't able to kind of pull something off at that time. So I spent a little bit of time actually working in education, which was another side interest of mine. I spent 3 months actually doing, and I was a part of the inaugural fellows class with the Mayor Kevin Johnson's office in Sacramento. So I helped work on his education policy for a couple of months. And then I moved to work in an education company in Southern California doing operations. So learned a lot about managing people, working at kind of an early stage company, so doing the whole startup thing kind of again in a different type of role. And then subsequent to that, moved to Atlanta. Was kind of recruited by a couple buddies of mine who said, hey, Atlanta's a really good place to be. I think you should think about it. From an entrepreneurship standpoint, it's actually a really attractive market. There's a lot of things working in Atlanta's favor. You've got a low cost of living, you've got great schools, you got a mayor, Kasim Reed, who was really excited about entrepreneurship and wants to push that and kind of harness the talent in Atlanta. So it might be something that you want to consider. So moved to Atlanta, got a job working at Home Depot through some HBS alums. So yes, the HBS network does work. And then got a corporate strategy and M&A job at Home Depot. Did that for about 1.5 years. Moved to actually work with some ex-Goldman guys at Global Payments doing M&A. So there, again, firsthand, buying companies, learning a lot about how to do deals on a global basis and how to do partnerships, really honed my thinking in terms of deal making. So as I was sitting there kind of, 10 years in my career, finance and technology, I realized that I had worked on every side of the transaction for the most part. You know, buying a company, selling a company, starting something very early stage, you know, working in a startup, seeing how that relationship was, and actually working in VC investing in firms. So I said to myself, wow, I know a lot about, you know, finance and doing deals. This is great. You know, as I see all this wealth being created, you know, I think about my own community, and I'm like, well, why is this going on, you know, in Chicago and, you know, in kind of neighborhoods where I come from? And I think it centers around, you know, I had these conversations with business partners all the time, like, what can we do to actually harness all these things that we know, this great experience we had, and maybe teach people in our community how to do something about it. So we started kicking around a bunch of different ideas and different models, didn't know what the right thing was, but the point was, we think we've kind of honed in on something that's important for our community, so let's put together some solutions and kind of kick it around in the marketplace and see what people think about it, right? But first it was really addressing, okay, why is it so tough for people in our communities to kind of get out the box, as we say, and be entrepreneurs? The first thing we came up with, you know, our hypothesis was, you know, lack of access to capital, right? If you actually look, there's one slide I actually put together I think would be really helpful just to kind of crystallize this point. If you look at kind of the net worth of households in this country and just the wealth gap between like our community, Latina communities, and others in the country, it's huge. And it actually, you know, hasn't moved that much, you know, over time, unfortunately, in terms of the gap. So we're really behind in terms of just overall wealth in our communities, right? And so it's not just like kind of on a dollar basis, but also compared to other communities. So, you know, I think that is, you know, one of the key things to start off with, you know, just our lack of access to capital and knowing about the system, right? I think there's other things that also contribute, you know, to entrepreneurship being difficult in our communities. General business expertise, right? So as we think about education levels, you know, I'm sure you guys are probably aware of the statistics, but right now, roughly only 50% of blacks and Latinos, you know, in public schools graduate from high school every year. So if you just think about over the long term, that number has been pretty stagnant for quite some time. So you think about what that actually does to the community. If only half of the people in your community are even making it out of high school, you know, we're not even talking about actual reading levels and proficiency in math. That obviously puts you at a disadvantage against other communities as well, right? So lack of, you know, the experience kind of in business roles, going far in education, you know, I think that's a huge, you know, barrier to success as well. So I think in our communities, just having that deep expertise about business in general and working in different industries is kind of, you know, making things a little bit more challenging. And then also a diverse network. So what, you know, I think I've been fortunate in kind of, you know, working in startups, working in venture capital, working in investment banking. I've been lucky that I've been able to kind of build this great diverse network of people of all races and who have worked across all industries. So if I got a question about healthcare, even though I know nothing about it, I know plenty of doctors or healthcare med device people or healthcare IT people that I can call and get an answer to a question fairly quickly, right? Not everybody can say that, right? So I think that, you know, as we look in our community and we talk to different individuals who want to get out the box, a lot of times it's knowing the right people to reach out to for help, how to refine the business model, how to put the pitch together, how to go about raising capital. If you don't have a diverse network of people to call on to for help, then it can be a little bit difficult. So, you know, if that brings us to kind of the legacy movement. Well, what are we trying to do to solve it? So the legacy movement is a startup that I launched that basically has this overarching vision of changing the conversation about success in entrepreneurship in underserved communities. So what does that really mean, right? So obviously we've talked about the huge knowledge and, you know, opportunity gap that exists in our communities, and so we know that we have to make some changes. So one of the things we want to do first is educate people, right? So we've actually built a technology platform that teaches people about how to start new ventures, whether it's for-profit, traditional for-profit, nonprofit businesses, or nonprofit entities, or social enterprises, right? And we're also teaching people how to buy and sell companies, right? So that's general entrepreneurship, kind of from starting from scratch, starting a new venture, and also M&A. But we've also said, and we know just from kind of our experience in the deal world, that it takes an access to good people to really get your deals done, right? So we're also at the same time building an ecosystem of individuals and organizations that can help people get their deals done. So that's a combination of lawyers, bankers, CPAs, serial entrepreneurs, emerging entrepreneurs, technology folks, you know, to help like kind of build, you know, tech businesses, and a number of different people that are central to an ecosystem working, right? So the thought is if you actually educate people, give them the basic tools and resources, all the good stuff that we're getting at Harvard Business School and our jobs as consultants and bankers and things like that, and at the same time, giving them access to the same high quality network of folks, that between those two things you can actually motivate and kind of get people out the box. And so essentially what it does is it breaks down all the barriers to entrepreneurship, right? So regardless of what your socioeconomic background is, regardless of where you grew up, where you went to school, regardless of who your family is, all these other things that, if you have these advantages growing up, it's relatively kind of straightforward to kind of get involved in business and be successful. So essentially, if you normalize the playing field and make access to all the resources free and available to everyone, and just basically have a network of folks that help you and support you, that increases the likelihood that you'll be successful, and it gives people that come from disadvantaged backgrounds a chance to actually lift themselves out of poverty. So it's a value proposition that, as we've kind of been out here early in the marketplace and have floated the idea to a lot of different community leaders, a lot of mayors, and some high-profile mayors around the country, it's actually been very well received. And so we're pretty excited about moving forward and actually doing more partnerships with different organizations that cater to people in underserved communities. So when I say underserved communities, people may say, well, what do you mean about that? What I really mean is focusing on kind of some key areas that, as we look in the deal space, we don't see people, right? So minority participants, women in business, and also with military veterans. So through the customer discovery process, what we found is that, let's take military veterans, for example. As they come back from overseas, from fighting in a war, it's very difficult for them to transition back into civilian life. You got people dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. You got banks, kind of pushing subprime loans to them. A lot of stuff going on, and really a lot of folks that I actually meet, kind of with military background say, I've got great people skills, I've got great leadership skills, but I don't know this whole tech startup stuff I hear people talking about. So that's what I need you to teach me. Teach me the technical skills, the fundamentals, and I can manage people and I can go put it together. So that's a core market for us. Female entrepreneurs, I think the National Venture Capital Association came out with some statistics recently that said that of all the venture money that's out in Silicon Valley, only 10% of it goes to female founders, right? We obviously know that we got more than 50% of women going to colleges. I think at Harvard Business School, the number's roughly around 40%, female in you guys' incoming class. So obviously there's some opportunities for improvement there, as a lot of the female founders that we work with still talk about struggles to kind of get their businesses off the ground and also raise capital. And with minorities, we just kind of went through the data and you see where it is. So obviously there's a lot of opportunity to address that as well. So we feel that we're actually attacking a really huge problem. We like the fact that we can stay nimble as a startup and kind of go into communities and not think about profits and really just think about impact. So when people try to compare us to different businesses that are out there, like Augusta or AngelList, I say, we don't just connect entrepreneurs and capital. We really connect people and ideas and knowledge and tools and resources, and that way the ecosystem can thrive on its own so people can be successful. Does that kind of make sense to everyone? Does that make sense? Okay. Another thing I wanted to address is kind of how this directly impacts students at HBS. So, a lot of students ask me, well, how can I as an MBA student get directly involved and kind of hit the ground running if I don't have ideas or I have capital? Well, I think there are a number of different things that you can do. As a lot of students know here, you guys have got access to some amazing resources through the Harvard Innovation Lab, through the field courses that you're involved in, the field immersion. So there's tons of resources that you already have at your fingertips. And one thing that I would suggest focusing on is really just honing in on what you're passionate about. As a lot of founders that I work with that are in our ecosystem that I've gotten to know over the last 10 years say, the easiest way to find a great business and to be happy and successful entrepreneur is to pick something you're actually passionate about, right? And figure out how can you turn that passion into a business. And after you do that, it's okay, focus on a key problem to solve. Think about something in the marketplace that doesn't work right or needs some improvement and try to just go fix it. Build a solution that someone will pay you for, make sure the value proposition is compelling, and there's your business right there. You align your passion with something that people will pay for, and if you can actually build a sustainable financial model, then you've got a business right there. So I think there are a lot of resources, and we actually have a lot of them on our site, legacymovement.net. We actually list out kind of a core set of books that a lot of entrepreneurs from around the country are reading. So there are little Silicon Valleys that are popping up all over the place in Austin, Atlanta, Charlotte, Chicago, you name it, right? Everybody's kind of getting a core set of knowledge and materials and reading these books and getting plugged in because these things work, right? So I think it's something that definitely people can do and really leverage while they're currently in school for these 2 years. Another thing, I think the question has come up, talking with some HBSers is, well, how do I evaluate new startup opportunities? How do I know this is a good business? Well, I think that you've got great, it's great that you actually have a core set of classes where, Tom Eisman, I know, teaches launch and technology ventures. That's a great class to take if you're in your second year or if you're thinking about it for next year. That actually helps you with that task. And there's also a lot of key good books out there. One is Venture Capital Due Diligence by Justin Camp. It basically teaches the way that VCs evaluate businesses. So if you think about how these companies going out here and raising tens and hundreds of millions of dollars, a lot of VCs kind of have a set due diligence process the way they look at technology companies, and it's actually a good lens for you to also evaluate what's the type of business I want to build. Is this fundable by people? Is this actually going to be sustainable? And it's definitely a good read. And we actually have a lot of books on our website in the recommended reading section for people to pick up and buy because a lot of people in the community use it. And I think also another good way to kind of evaluate good ideas is by looking at just actual milestones and traction, right? So if someone comes to you and says, hey, I've got this great idea, I just got funded, I just raised $1.5 million, I would say, well, how are you doing on the customer traction side? Are there any revenues? Are there any EBITDA? Are there other milestones you could point to prove that you actually have a viable business? That's the best way to really judge a business is by customers and revenue and traction. What is the market saying about your product as you soft pitch it to different people? Do you have letters of intent from customers to buy the product once you get a prototype built? Right? I think there's key milestones that you actually can identify when you're evaluating different startups, whether it's for investment or startups you want to join, or it's maybe a space that you want to play in, looking at what else is going on in your market and seeing, well, if I'm trying to do something similar to this guy and they're striking out, maybe I shouldn't try that. Maybe I should try to improve on their model, and that should be my business. And the last thing, and I'll open up for questions after this, a question that came up was, where can MBAs provide the most value at startups and small businesses? I think that's a very interesting question because if you actually ask your typical kind of startup founder, a lot of times those guys have chips on their shoulders and don't think MBAs are that valuable. I actually disagree. I think MBAs bring a ton of experience. They bring great frameworks in terms of decision making, great consultant-like skills, and also great finance skills. And you'll actually find a lot of founders, they're really passionate about their ideas, they're go-getters, they're risk-takers, and that's great. Those are all key traits for entrepreneurship, but they lack some of these key skill sets that MBAs possess, and I think it's a great complement to the management teams, right? So as you're out there thinking about what opportunities you want to go after, I look at some founders and some teams and some early-stage companies and say, is this company actually missing some skill sets that I possess? And I think that's where you actually set yourself up for the best time for success, because you're actually bringing something to the table that maybe that startup or that founder doesn't have. In addition, I think that, just leveraging kind of your backgrounds and your skills and what you're doing here, you can even, just as kind of a way to kind of get your feet wet with entrepreneurship, to kind of test it out, is this entrepreneurship thing really for me? Just go volunteer to work for free at a local small business. Just volunteer your time and your services and just say, hey, I'm thinking about doing a startup, or I'm thinking about being a small business owner sometime in one day. You got this great business in the Black community. How about I go work for you for 3 months? Maybe you do, some type of project for them. Have them sit down and tell you about what needs they do. And I tell you, just from being out here doing network job searches, if you volunteer your time for free, most people aren't going to say no, right? So I think it's actually a great way for you to get great experience and actually add true, tangible value to small businesses and startups, and also a way for you as an individual to see, is this entrepreneurship thing really for me? Let me actually go work at a startup or work at a local small business and see if I can see myself doing this maybe in 3 to 5 years. So those are the gist of my comments. I'm happy to answer any questions about the startup that I'm working on, entrepreneurship in general, how you guys as MBAs can set yourself up for success as small business owners.
So a couple questions.
Yep.
So the first, I think most MBAs are in a position where they're coming out of school with a nice chunk of debt. So how do you think about being an entrepreneur but having to manage a very real challenge, which is having to pay that back? And two, for people who want to be entrepreneurial but don't necessarily want to do it immediately after school, what should they be doing to orient themselves in that direction so that 2, 3, 4, 5 years out, they can actually start to make that transition?
Yeah, so let me answer the second question first. So here's one thing that I actually noticed in working with a number of different founders over the last decade or so. Aligning yourself with really successful people that you can learn from, right? So it's less about the startup and whether or not you think that startup is going to IPO or get bought for $100 million by Google, and really about the founders and the people that are on that management team, right? Because what they teach you when you're at that company is going to be so valuable that when you go to launch your company, not only are those guys going to be potential investors that you can call on, right, for your kind of that seed capital, right, so you can get out the box, but also the lessons because they've done it before. So I would spend more time actually evaluating the team and the people and looking at their track record and their background and how successful they've been versus looking at whether or not that company is going to be like the next, you know, billion-dollar company that hits like kind of the tech marketplace. Because that valuable experience and knowing those people, I mean, I just think about people in the career that I've met, those people are invaluable to you as you know, become an actual founder yourself. And on the first question about the debt issue, so I get it. I still pay my student loans. They're a drag on your income. Get it. I think the best thing to do there's a book. It's called The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. I highly suggest everyone get that book. I'm sure a lot of people here have heard about it, but if you haven't, go pick it up and read it. It teaches you how to build a minimum viable product, or another way to say it is, it teaches you how to build a business for cheap to test out if this is really going to work. So before you take that leap, like you mentioned, like what if you're going to want to go work a couple of years first, right? So you can be working a corporate job and you can actually use lean startup principles to test whether or not a business actually works before you just jump out there, right? And when you do jump out there, they also talk a lot about how to get your finances in order to set up like kind of a lean lifestyle. So what that means is making some sacrifices that all entrepreneurs have to do, kind of downsizing some of your expenses, like thinking about, okay, I'm spending currently, you know, $5,000 to $6,000 a month, you know, working at Goldman Sachs. I'm living a high life, I'm living great. But if I'm going to do this entrepreneurship thing and I'm going to try to get traction on this product, I may need to maybe lower some of my monthly expenses so I can actually get my business off the ground, and then take more of that cash and put it into the development of your product, right? So it not only teaches you how to build a lean business, but also talks about how to lead a lean life, which is going to lower your monthly cash burn, and then increase the likelihood of success for your startup. Any other questions, comments? Yep.
Talk a little bit more about the legacy movement and just the value proposition and I guess how you're generating cash flows.
Yeah, definitely. So let me actually just show a little quick video for you guys that I think that might be helpful, and I can go into a little bit about the value prop. So the gist of the model is we've kind of identified 4 key stakeholder groups that we're going to focus on in terms of building our user base, right? So that's emerging or current, you know, kind of entrepreneurs and business owners. That's financial capital providers, so your typical VCs, angel investors, banks, and those people. It's individuals that want to sell a business, right? So a lot of small, medium-sized business owners, as they get older in age, want to transition out of their business and kind of passing it down to their families, and quote-unquote leaving their legacy isn't always an option. So they're looking for buyers of their business. And it's also people, again, who want to buy a business instead of starting one from scratch. So during our customer discovery process, we actually found a lot of individuals that were more comfortable actually acquiring an established business, because it was easier for them, not only from a kind of risk tolerance perspective, but also from kind of a personal situation. So a lot of guys in, you know, kind of 35, 40 age range will say, well, I've got a mortgage, I've got 2 kids, I've got, you know, a wife at home, and I've got all this stuff going on. So me just jumping out and just doing like a mobile-based startup probably isn't going to work for me. But if there's already a business out there that works and generates cash flow, you know, I can get, you know, my savings and line up a couple of guys who can pool our money together, get some debt and buy a business. I just need you to teach me M&A. Right? So that's another key stakeholder group we fall on. So it's really identifying 4 key stakeholder groups and then marketing our platform to them. So As I mentioned, all the education and content that we have on our platform around teaching people how to buy companies, sell companies, and start companies is free. So we give that away. We do offline workshops, at different, with our academic partners and with different nonprofits in various cities to actually teach and go deeper on a lot of topics that we talk about on our website. And then in addition to that, as I mentioned, we're building this ecosystem of people and organizations that can help people get their deals done. They're relevant in the ecosystem. So that's what people actually pay for. So it's a subscription-based model where people pay $25 a month and they get access to connect to all these people. And so we actually set up some features on the website that make it easy to connect. So one is just a basic search engine, right? With basically, as you fill out your profile, very much similar to LinkedIn, you're listing what value you bring to the ecosystem, what you're actually looking for from the ecosystem. Like say you're a startup founder, you say, hey, I need a CTO, here's what I'm looking for. You list your industry, you list your location, things like that. Just some basic stuff about your strengths and what you're trying to do and where you live, right? And also what industry you're in. So that way when you go to the search query, you actually can search for people by the stakeholder group that you've identified with when you sign up. You can actually, search for people by industry, and you can search for people by zip code as well. So what it allows you to do is, if you have a preference for finding a business partner that lives close to you, you can specify that. But if you say, hey, my business is virtual, I don't care where people live, I don't care where my investors live, I just need capital, then you can search anywhere in the country. So that way you can connect to anyone that's on the platform. What we've also done, as I told you, I've talked to a lot of people during our customer discovery process, and one thing we actually found was that a lot of people just aren't idea people, right? So they can't think of an idea from scratch, but they know they want to do something kind of in a small business or in a startup, but they just don't know where to get started. So they say, if you can actually help me identify teams that already exist or people that already have ideas, that's something I'd be interested in. So we've actually added an idea forum on our platform where literally our members can go to just post problems they want to solve or just post business ideas. They don't have to give the whole kit and caboodle, but they can just say, my name is Matt. I want to work on solving the traffic congestion problem in Atlanta. I got this cool app that I'm working on. If you're interested in solving this problem with me, find me because I need a co-founder, right? So now for all those people that don't have ideas, they can just basically look at, kind of this list that is included by all the members and basically say, hey, here, by industry, these are the things that people are working on, and they're actively looking for teams. So you can actually reach out to them directly and join their teams. So we got the search query, we got the idea forum, we got the profile search. We're adding different features and functionality for our key stakeholder groups. They've told us through feedback that they want to see. So for investors, for example, investors will be allowed to actually come up with filters so that people don't spam their inbox out with a bunch of crappy business plans, right? So for anybody who's ever worked as an investor, you know that once people know you got money, you're constantly getting bombarded with requests for, hey, take this meeting, I want you to invest in my business, blah, blah, blah. So we've actually designed it, we're actually working on a functionality where investors can come up with criteria that entrepreneurs will have to fill out. So basically, as they kind of get inbound requests, if people don't meet that filter, it doesn't hit their inbox. So it makes it a more efficient way for actually investors to find and sort through deals because that's what they want. They want to save time and they want high quality deal flow. So working on functionality like that basically is just making it easier for people to plug into resources to learn, but also to connect with others when they're actually going to get their deals done. Yep.
Good evening. Have you noticed any trends regarding industries that your companies on the Legacy Movement platform are, or any trends as far as geography? And also, how has that affected your resources you're providing?
Yeah. So our view is to be industry agnostic. We feel that kind of in the deal world, and it's actually happens in different cities too. Sometimes people lean towards a certain industry just maybe because that's what's going on in that space. So like in Boston, for example, heavy in the life sciences, heavy in healthcare, heavy in mobile, and a little bit of tech, right? If you go out to Silicon Valley, all types of technology companies. If you're in LA, you're entertainment focused, digital media, a lot of real estate stuff going on. So every city kind of has its kind of key industries. But what's great about technology is actually giving birth to a lot of different companies that are solving problems across all those industries, right? So I definitely could say that technology is probably the leader in what I basically see. But I'm actually working right now with a classmate of mine on a hospitality deal in Atlanta. So it actually stretches all across the board. So we actually stay industry agnostic because what we've learned through our customer discovery process is that we can't create these barriers for people and say, we're only going to work with people in tech and healthcare because that's easy to get backing from VCs, right? That actually doesn't solve the problem. The point is to actually make it open to anyone based on anything they want to do. So let's say it's just a guy who lives in Inglewood in Chicago. And he just says, hey, I'm not trying to do the next Instagram. You know, I'm a guy, I just graduated from high school, but there's this need for like some better laundromat services in Inglewood, south side of Chicago. Not gonna make me $1 million, but maybe it makes $100,000. That's enough for him to feed his family and get out of poverty, right? So if he comes to us with that idea, we're gonna help him get that deal done because that solves his problem, right? Creating a business that actually gets him out of poverty and improves the situation.
So I guess I had a question in regards to kind of your definition of underserved communities.
Yep.
So it seems like you do a lot of deals, in particular outside maybe the Atlanta area. You're talking about kind of communities that are outside maybe Silicon Valley, Boston, kind of your bigger markets. So I know just kind of in previous projects and experiences I've had, in particular in New Orleans, one of the big problems we saw, like you talked about the access to financial capital.
Yeah.
In the seed rounds, there's kind of local financiers that are available to help with kind of the smaller checks. But once you got to the bigger follow-on rounds, that's where kind of the bigger guys in Silicon Valley and Boston had to come in.
Yeah.
And that connection wasn't there because most times they want to be close to their companies or they see that as a bigger risk. So I guess what kind of advice would you give to kind of some of your maybe clients and some of those type of communities, those type of smaller, especially in the South, markets?
Yeah, you bring up a great issue, and you know I'm actually on the executive committee of Startup Atlanta, and we talk about that all the time. You know, the access to institutional money in the venture capital space in Atlanta, and I see it in a couple other smaller cities that we're trying to penetrate as well. And so I think at that stage, the key question to ask, and I think this is important, and we actually talk about this on our side in our education session, is do you actually need VC money? So I was at a talk last night with a partner from a local VC firm, and it was funny, he actually confessed that a lot of people didn't really need VC money. They seek it out because it's an alternative and it's available to them, or they have access to the networks, they can get it, but really they might actually be better off just building the business off cash flow. So what I would do with that founder, if that person came to me and said, okay, I've gotten to this point, based off of seed money or based off of bootstrap, and now I'm ready for VC, the first question I would say, well, are you actually profitable right now? Do you really need VC money, or can you actually build this business off cash flow? And then I would also work with them to explain to them kind of the nuances, pros and cons of raising VC money, and actually say, do you really want to spend time out here fundraising for 6 months, especially if it's a first-time entrepreneur? It's going to take him longer to raise that round because VCs are very skeptical about funding first-time entrepreneurs, right? So the amount of time he spends fundraising, 6 to 12 months maybe, let's say, especially if you're talking about being from the South, all those trips out west, all the trips, maybe across the Southeast meeting with different people, is that time really valuable, or should really be actually spending it with customers? Right, and what's that trade-off? Sacrificing revenue and EBITDA for a bunch of meetings that may not actually turn out to be fruitful and productive. So I think first evaluating, does that founder actually even need VC money? And if the answer is yes, they just have to have it, then actually working with different groups, because actually a lot of VC nows are more open to actually investing outside of their region. This is a trend that's actually picking up across different cities. And part of what's driving that is because it's so hard to find good deals. So they're actually taking some of their previous preferences and saying, 10 years ago I used to say, yeah, the company has to be in the backyard. If you want my money, move to Sand Hill Road or Palo Alto, whatever it is. Now people are saying, we're just looking for good deals. So people in the Valley are setting up offices all over the country. You've got people in different smaller markets like Boston, New York, and Atlanta. They're actually looking out of state. And a lot of VCs actually do syndicate deals. So basically, it'll be a reputable VC that will lead around, say it's local in that person's town. They'll call up their other VC buddies or other angel buddies, and they'll kick in money, right? So they'll just syndicate the rest of the round out, thus de-risking it for a lot of different people, because you got one guy that you trust leading the round, and then you also are filling out the round with other people in their cash, so it isn't all on you, right? So there are a couple of ways to go about that. So location, the barriers around location and raising money have actually come down a lot over the last several years. Any other questions? Ooh, yeah, go ahead.
This is a follow-on to the issue of raising capital and getting VC money.
Yeah.
Have there been any considerations for a potential group funding model from Legacy?
From where?
As far as group funding, so having a bunch of people kind of pull their research together?
So I've been involved in investment groups before. I didn't necessarily have the best experience. I don't necessarily think that's the best model, because I think that when it comes to funding, it shouldn't just be about the money, it should also be about the expertise that the investors bring. So I think that's key. So when you start talking about a large group of people coming in on a round and then decision making, that gets really difficult, right? So I think it actually is smarter to have a smaller round, but making sure that you've got some strategic investors in it that can actually bring expertise, that can make customer introductions, They can make personnel introductions, so help you find smart, talented people to add to your management team, kind of that early team. And so maybe those extra, 30-something people that you're thinking about bringing around, yeah, it's money, but if they're not bringing to the table, it might actually like disrupt things, because when it comes time for tough decisions, or maybe when things don't go right in the company, you just got a lot of, as you say, cooks in the kitchen, right? And actually, I think it helps you to have a smaller number of cooks in the kitchen, but make sure you have the right cooks in the kitchen. So, if you think about where I'm going to get 4 investors for my round, make sure probably at least 2 of them are like smart guys who can actually bring expertise and people into, kind of your business and help you grow it. And maybe the other 2, it's just really for capital, right? So there's a way to kind of stack the round with what they say is, I'm not going to use the word dumb, but smart money and non-smart money.
Are you tracking the success of the entrepreneurs you're helping?
Yeah, so actually on our testimonials page, we're going to do this a couple of different ways. Right now we're just doing it via text. So basically, as we work with different people in our ecosystem, they oftentimes will either email me or call me and just talk about different successes that they had on our website. So we actually track that on our testimonials page. I don't actually have a technical way to track it. I thought about that, but to do it is really technically complex and actually kind of expensive. So at this point in the venture, it's really just people reaching back out to me, say, hey, you actually spent time on the phone, you helped me to kind of negotiate a compensation agreement, loved it, had a great time. And I'll say something like, hey, do you mind if we post that to the website? Because that's good feedback for us. And they'll say, sure, of course, you just helped me out. Right? So we're actually tracking testimonials through that. We're doing it in a text form now. We're going to do it in video once we have kind of more bandwidth to actually do more interviews with our founders. So right now we've probably filmed about 7 founders from our ecosystem. We've probably got about 20 in the pipeline. And essentially we're going to do 2 things with our founder interviews. The first is, let's just post them to YouTube, because these guys and these women have great stories to tell about how they got off the ground in terms of entrepreneurship, right? When you actually listen to their stories about how they built the business, how they dealt with failure, how they raised their first round of capital, they're actually great stories that everybody needs to hear. So we said, hey, we need to capture this and make sure everybody in the community knows what's going on, making sure that people know that these people are right there in their backyard and they're available on the platform. And what we also learned was, as I sit with founders every day, I hear the same questions all the time. So for example, with female founders, what I oftentimes hear from a lot of females who want to be entrepreneurs, they say, well, I also want to get married and have kids too. And I know with entrepreneurship, you kind of just got to go all in. So how do you balance that? How do you actually have like a full personal life, get married, have kids, but also be like a rock star CEO? So there are several female founders in our network who we interviewed that have told great stories about how they did it. So we're actually going to chop up the interviews and clips and then organize them by topic area. So when people have a specific question about a specific nuance with entrepreneurship or building a business or buying a business, they can actually just go to our media page and then just click on it and learn, the perspectives of multiple founders and basically just choose for them what works. We're not in the business of telling people you have to be an entrepreneur, or you have to buy a company, you have to start from scratch, you have to be a franchisee. It's more about laying out the alternatives for them and just basically educating them on the pros, the cons, the risk involved, and letting them choose for themselves.
How are you deciding who you help and when you help them? Let's say on an M&A deal, etc. So I'm sure you would, you can only do so much, right?
Yeah.
So how do you make those decisions?
Yeah, so it works a couple of different ways. So I'm an ex-investment banker. I'm sure we got a couple SEO alums, in the audience, and a lot of, my SEO buddies did investment banking and corporate finance. So I actually have tons of investment bankers at my disposal and kind of like in my network to leverage for help for things. In addition to that, a lot of the founders or the people that we're working with, they're not doing these mega billion-dollar transactions. They're actually doing smaller deals. And in most cities, you have boutique investment banks that focus specifically on that space. Smaller size, they're not necessarily competing with Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, so that's their niche. And they are hungry for business. So actually having them on the platform helps them actually get business, right? So they're actually really open to a platform that actually helps them generate additional deal flow, right? So when we actually bring them founders who say they want to acquire a business, and they're working either with different PE shops or people that hire them and say, hey, help me sell this business, it's only, $2, $3, $4 million, so Goldman Sachs isn't interested. That founder or that management team goes out and hires a local bank and then basically that local bank is looking for, a lot of times, local buyers for those businesses. So we have banks that we work with that we actually refer people to. They're on our platform actually looking for deals. And also I do a lot of stuff offline because that's just sometimes a preference that people want to communicate and say, hey, here's my criteria. You know what I like. So as you find something that fits my criteria, just send them my way and I'm happy to talk to them. So some of it's formal, some of it's informal. But we basically work with banks to understand what their criteria is and what types of people they work with. And then we send them the deals as appropriate. In addition to answering basic questions about how to value a business, right? So in our education section, in our list of recommended reading, we have books on finance and how to value businesses. But let's say someone broadcasts that message out to the ecosystem. We actually have a functionality on the site that does that. It basically is like a newsfeed function, but it's different from Facebook in that you don't have to be my friend to see my message, right? So it's basically a call out to the ecosystem. My name is James. I don't know finance. I need someone to teach me how to value a business, or I need someone to review my financial model. Well, if we've already got a network of investment bankers that can do that in 5 minutes, that's great for him because he can get the help where he doesn't actually need to go pay like a valuation business consultant to go do a form, because he can just ask on the platform. Vernon and myself can answer that question in like 2 seconds, right? So that's the value of the network, is you stack the ecosystem with a bunch of people with the relevant skill sets, and then you actually build tools that make it easier for them to connect to each other and share knowledge and information. Yep.
So this is a question more to you guys. As we think about ways to leverage Aaron or leverage legacy, what are the types of events, the type of functions that you think would actually be helpful to you while you're here? What type of things could be helpful? And if you have anything off the top of your head, I think now would be a great time to throw them out as we think about ways to build upon this for the rest of the semester.
Yeah, and I think also something that would be helpful to ponder is, what are people's general thoughts, not only in the room, but just in ASU about entrepreneurship? I can speak from my experience kind of being here from 07, 09. What was interesting is that everybody came in saying they want to do X, Y, and Z. A lot of it was centered around finance, some around consulting. But then what happened when the market blew up is that people now all of a sudden started thinking about different things. So now all of a sudden entrepreneurship is an option because I can't get that job at McKinsey because they're only hiring 2 people out of our class, right? Or I can't go do banking or whatever. So I'm curious to actually know, are people thinking about entrepreneurship? Is that something that's interesting to folks? And maybe that might be something helpful that we can incorporate into programming and useful to people if it is.
Well, I mean, I'll just, answer the question, I guess, on a macro level for all our classmates. I think last year, correct me if I'm wrong, Vern, that the Entrepreneurship Club was like the largest it's ever been.
Yeah.
Right, so I think the school is kind of flipped a little bit of who they bring into each class.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us already expressed interest in entrepreneurship through our essays, etc.
Yeah.
At some point in our careers, where previously, you may have had more people interested in finance and consulting, etc.
Yeah.
I think overall, to some level, at least the people in this room are interested in entrepreneurship to some degree, either right away or sometime in the future.
Got it. So do you think there are any, and you don't have to answer this, I mean, maybe you can answer it in a general format or maybe just you specifically. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but if you were, I assume you're a second year, correct?
First year.
First year, okay. So if you were to think, if someone said, would you start a business in these next 2 years, like utilize this time where you're in school and you can literally just like kick around so many different ideas with so many smart people and so many resources, do you see any barriers to that for you personally, or?
For me, it's just the idea.
Yeah.
Right? So if I found a good idea, I'd jump on it, in a heartbeat.
Got it.
It's just around the idea. So absolutely.
Okay.
Can I offer some perspective on this whole thing?
Definitely. Oh, so just I'm gonna have to call him out. So I can actually show it to you. So Michael Moore. This is Michael Moore. Michael is one of my advisors. So just so happened that he was here, kind of doing some work for his own startup. Michael has an extensive background in marketing and branding and messaging and is way better at it than I am, so that's why he's on my team. So I had the pleasure of meeting Michael through a mutual friend, yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that he was here. So,
I just wanted to mention about the whole question of entrepreneurship and is it for you. I started my career kind of in the Fortune 500 world at Kraft and at Coke, and then I quickly sort of pivoted to smaller companies, and I've done startups. I've put a shingle out and done my own consulting. I've run mid-sized companies as well, and I think it's important to be sort of introspective about who you are and what you need and want, and sort of the kind of environment you can be successful in. I mean, we romanticize entrepreneurship, and I think rightly so in this country, but it's not for everyone. I mean, I've been in situations where, I had to, call my parents and borrow money to meet payroll. That's not a level of stress that everybody wants. Now, there's in a sort of macabre kind of a way. I mean, there's some kind of energy and excitement about those kind of stresses in a bizarre way, but it's not for everyone, and it's okay. I mean, it's not a bad thing if that's not for you. I mean, I love it. I have worked in small environments. I've never done a technology startup, and I'm sort of at the point in my life where it's like, okay, either I'm going to do it or I'm not, and so I'm diving into one right now. But I would just encourage you to seek out opportunities, whether through internships or whatever, if that's something that is intriguing to you, to sort of get a feel and a taste for that environment, and then just kind of take an inventory of your own things that you like and that you don't like and that you're comfortable with. And on the Fortune 500 side, I mean, I'm sure you guys have all been in big companies. I mean, there's a level of dealing with the bureaucracy that's a little bit different as well. And some people would say, and I think this applies to me, it's actually riskier for me to be in a big company than to be in a smaller company. So it's just up to you. And I would just say, like I said, underscore, just be sensitive about who you are and what you want and need, and then just go for it.
Yeah, that's actually an amazing point. It's actually the first topic that I wrote about in the entrepreneurship section on the website, is entrepreneurship for me. And ironically enough, we're actually launching a partnership with Alpha Kappa Psi at Georgia Tech next week. And the first workshop that we're doing, which is next week, is the corporate path versus the entrepreneurship path. And is it really something for me? Because that's the topic that's on a lot of students' minds at Georgia Tech. And this is a tech-focused school, right, that has like the marquee accelerated flashpoint in town, and those kids are still trying to wrap their arms around, how do I take this genius that I have in engineering or computing or whatever it is, and turn that into an actual real tangible business? How do I find the co-founder? Like, how do I do this, right? And is it safer, quote unquote, to just go to Google or do technology investment banking or whatever it is? And that concept of safe is really interesting. What's less risky, because every job is safe until they show up to your desk with the pink slip, right? So, like, I think it's something that, with the financial crisis is put into perspective for a lot of folks, because when I was coming in, a lot of HBSers, from 08, that second year, were just getting laid off left and right because, there was just no demand to support them in investment banking and in consulting. So they were getting laid off left and right. So these so-called safe jobs that everybody thought they had went away very quickly. So I just encourage people to just open their minds about risk-taking and what's quote-unquote safe. And I think it's best to just arm yourselves with tools and knowledge, so in that worst-case event of a layoff, that you actually do have a toolkit that's ready to just go out and just build a business quickly, because you know that, again, every job is safe until they show up with the pink slip, right? So just have a backup plan. I think that's smart, whether you're doing entrepreneurship right out of school, 3 years from now, whatever it is, it's always smart to have a backup plan and understand the risk involved, so that if you have your back up against the wall and you do just have to start a company out of necessity, which a lot of people have had to do in the last several years, you're more well equipped to do it. You're not just kind of scrambling, running all over the place trying to make rent. So.
Question, and it's a little bit to Vernon's point, about finding the idea. Like, I don't have the idea, but I would love to work on a really rich project or solve a complex question that somebody may have either tried and failed. Have you seen any processes in place for where ideas actually may hit the graveyard and somebody walks away from it, but then somebody might want to come back with a new solution to it?
Yeah.
Or where do those come from? And to your point about sessions or ideas that we want to look for, I would love to think about ways to. collect those ideas?
Yeah, so I actually write about this on the site. One of the topic is named, which idea should I focus on? I get that question a lot, like how do I come up with the idea? So that's partly why we built the idea forum on our website, because so many people kept asking me that. And then the second thing is there are actually books out there. One is called Business Model Generation. And they actually go through this exercise called a business model canvas that allows you to do kind of this really deep dive in a very kind of scientific way on evaluating whether or not a business idea makes sense and whether or not it's actually profitable. So it's called Business Model Generation. It's on our site. I highly recommend picking that book up. And then obviously the Lean Startup one is a good complement to it by Eric Ries as well. And I think between those two, figuring out like the idea and trying to find a cheap way to like build a product to test it really quickly without kind of betting the farm on it is perfect for you, especially if you're in school for the next 2 years. Like Lean Startup, Business Model Generation, you'll come up with a whole bunch of things and then can go out and actually have tangible skills to go test some things. That in conjunction with what's going on at the iLab and the classes at our office in your second year by Tom Eisman. I mean, I think there are tons of ways that while you're in school, you can leverage that and figure out something really quickly. Because you're right, coming up with that rockstar idea is tough for people. So that's why I think like an idea forum is helpful, but also teaching people how to think about what should the idea be. The framework that I see a lot of people using is just solving a problem. And after you figure out solving a problem, the next step is, well, is that a business, right? So will people pay me for it? That's a question even for its business. Will people even pay me for it? Because some things are good to like solve a problem and they're nice to have, but I wouldn't pay for it. Like if somebody could do time travel, that's cool, but if you have to charge me $10 million to do it every time I want to jump time travel, I'm probably not going to do it because it's not worth $10 million, right? So that's not feasible for me. So if you haven't taken kind of strategy yet in your first year, you'll learn about competitive advantage and this whole willingness and ability to pay for customers, right? So it's got to be both of those things. Customers got to have a willingness to pay for it, and they actually have the ability to pay for it, right? And so very quickly you'll find out if customers will even pay you for whatever it is you're trying to solve. But if the answer is yes, they will pay you, now it's like, okay, let me take this business model generation book and let's actually try to build a profitable business around the solution. And you may have to just like kind of plug and play and try out different things and make different choices on the revenue side, on the cost side to get to a profitable business model. But if after all that analysis you just don't get there, maybe it's a great idea, but it's not your business. And that's good learning for you to test out before you go bet the farm and do it, right? So that, I recommend picking up those two books. A lot of people are using scientific methods to get to it.
The other thing, just real quick, and just to jump on, Jim Collins has a book out called Good to Great that's maybe 10 years old or so, where he talks about getting the right people on the bus, and basically says that sometimes it doesn't really matter the idea. If you've got the right people, you will gravitate to the right idea.
That's correct. Yeah, having smart people around you, I couldn't say that more enough. I mean, that's the advice I get from founders all the time and successful serial entrepreneurs that we interview is that team. Like that team of people that will be honest with you, give you great feedback, that will work as hard as you and are as passionate about the idea as you are, trustworthy people, having integrity. And you know what? That's what a lot of people invest in at the early stage anyway, is a team. It's you and the people you surround yourself with. They're going to go real deep on their backgrounds and say, okay, is this a team I can believe in? Am I comfortable just putting 50, 100,000, 150,000 in? And do I believe that they're going to get to that next stage where they're actually raising bigger rounds and actually going to build something profitable? So you may not have anything to start. No product, no service. You just got the idea. But you know that maybe it costs, I don't know, $150,000 to build what you're trying to build. So now you just have to go out here and sell and convince people that you're worth the $150,000 investment. I'd say probably 80% of my time is spent selling. The strategy work is already done. Now only thing I'm out here doing is just selling, right? And before we actually had the website up, when I had no quote unquote product, I was just selling a vision, right? So I had to, the only way we made progress was people believing in what I was actually articulating, seeing it and saying, okay, I want to do a deal with this guy and I want to be in bed with him because I think what he's building is going to be great. I'm going to trust that he's going to work out all the website stuff, and I see he's got a great personality, so he can build relationships. And now it's just about track record, traction, like just let me show me that you've hit these milestones. So I think that honing your selling skills also is key, because in this idea phase, what you're going to find is you're going to have to sell people with nothing. And if you can't get that part right, it's going to be really tough for you to get out that box. So, yep.
Okay, just had those two questions, kind of going back to your question regarding things that would be interesting to hear from you, I guess, in the future. I I guess one, it seems like obviously you have a lot of experience in recreating ecosystems, and thinking about that, and I know there's a lot of skeptics out there. I think one in particular is a paper called How to Recreate Silicon Valley or something by some MIT guy, which basically create these really high bars, and your ability to do this. So just hearing more about that would definitely be interesting. And I guess the other thing, just as far as what stops or the things you worry about in if you're considering entrepreneurship. So I'm 100% interested in entrepreneurship. I guess the only thing that does come into mind is, in particular, like working for a startup during that first summer, my debt that's going to come after the school. In particular, when I thought about how much it would cost me to go here, I factored in the fact that, hey, well, maybe I could work for a consulting firm or something over the summer and bring in $20-some-odd thousand, right? So it's just the idea of, balancing, what I really want to do and what I'm passionate about versus the financial realities that I don't have anyone I can go to. If I can't pay it, it ain't getting paid. So just your thoughts on that would be.
So I'll answer the second one first. I thought about the same thing. I don't have anybody to go to either, right? My buddy, who helped me kind of conceptualize this, said to me, look, your student loans are always going to be there, all right? You just took out 100 and some odd grand. They're going to be there, so get over it, right? Just go do the business that you're passionate about. Stop worrying about the student debt. It's going to be what, $1,300 a month maybe, $1,000 a month when you get out of school. That's what it is. So whatever business you build, make sure you bake that in, that you can cover that $1,000, $1,300 a month, and just keep moving. Because there's nothing you can do right now to erase that debt unless you just hit the lottery jackpot and just pay it all off, right? So there's no need even thinking about it, because it's a barrier that's preventing you from getting to that next step and getting out the box and that rockstar idea, because you can't erase the debt, right? It's there. So I wouldn't even think about it if I were you. Know how much it's going to be on a monthly basis, $1,000, $1,200, whatever it is. Build that into your model. That's all I would do there. On the summer note, you said, well, I'm going to go make $20,000 over the summer. I don't know how much you took out, but is that covering all the debt? If it's not, your monthly payments when you get out is, you know what I mean? So I'd actually do the math to say, if I'm going to forego something I really think that can be valuable in teaching me these entrepreneurial skills, plus getting me in the network of people. So the startup you go work with over the summer is probably going to be some HBS guy ran it, right? If you're in bed with the Rock Center, they coordinate fellowships all the time. I did one. That's how I worked for Gazelle, right? And it was a Goldman guy, ex-Goldman guy, and HBS guy that found me, right? So you're probably going to work for somebody you're going to learn a lot from. The guy who I worked for was he was part of the whole PayPal mafia, right? Amazing contact to be in bed with, right? So I think about the value that internship is going to create for you in terms of entrepreneurship long term versus the extra $15,000 you may make over the summer working for McKinsey. And then on the startup piece, so the ecosystem development. So I haven't read the paper that you're talking about, but if you don't know already, there's something called Startup America. It's an initiative that's being driven by Steve Case, kind of an idea that came out of the Obama administration, and they're actually building these teaching people how to build startup ecosystems in every state, basically in the country, and leaving it up to kind of the players in that market to kind of take these tools and this framework and just go build out your ecosystem if it doesn't already exist, or teaching people how to actually harness their current ecosystem better. So Startup Georgia actually launches October 17th in conjunction with Venture Atlanta, which is like our largest kind of technology and venture capital conference. So people are kind of riding that momentum, and it's actually happening all over the country. So they're actually trying to formalize the teaching of building ecosystems to kind of spur some of that innovation, entrepreneurial activity. Not going to say that that's going to be the complete right answer. I think it still takes the people on the ground to get it right. So it really takes someone who's kind of been in these worlds to see what works and what doesn't, then to kind of be in the city actually helping out doing it. So in Atlanta, for example, we actually have founders that have lived in a number of different cities that have now called Atlanta their home. So they're bringing best practices from other cities, Austin, Palo Alto, and some other places like New York, and bringing it back to Atlanta. And they're involved also with Startup Atlanta, helping build that out. So you got a lot of stuff going on around the country that you can just kind of plug into wherever you decide to live. And I guarantee you somebody there is either affiliated with Startup America or has been somewhere else and decided to call that place home. And I would get with that person and just build it out. So that's kind of the approach that we're taking as well. Is we've got our own kind of idea about how we want to build our own ecosystem and community, which is a community of openness, transparency, everybody helping out, giving back, and making sure that we're contributing to these underserved communities, because it's a social enterprise, right? It's not about making $1 million. It's about actually being in the kind of the tough to serve areas. Like for example, the South Side where I grew up in Chicago, teaching in Inglewood, where Derrick Rose grew up, right? That's a focus area for us, right? If we're in Chicago, but we're not in those communities actually helping out, I'm sure as you people are aware, they just had a big strike, right, with the school system. They had, I don't know, how many shootings over the course of the summer? That happens every summer. It's been happening ever since I was a kid, right? So many people that look like us are dying in the streets every summer because they've stripped the school of all their resources. There's no after-school programs for people. Drugs, guns, rampant all over the south side and the west side. People just die, right? We need to be doing something to address that. If we're not doing that, then we're not executing our vision. So you'll find that as you're out here in different cities, there's a lot of people trying to address this problem and actually leveraging this whole ecosystem concept to do it. And you've got social entrepreneurs who are actually getting with the tech folks and saying, hey, you guys know how to build companies real quick. Why don't you guys teach us how to build companies so we can go build social enterprises and make real impact? So there's a lot going on in the country right now around this movement. Lots.
Listen, guys, I wanna wrap this up. I think Aaron will be around for maybe 10, 15 minutes if you guys have additional questions when I talk. I think this is kind of a good starting point, a good foundation point. Send out any suggestions, recommendations on what would be helpful for you, because I think ultimately we're trying to create a network that actually helps you come to the answers that you're trying to figure out right now. So I want to thank Aaron. Thanks for coming. Hopefully we'll be selecting you.
If you guys have any questions, happy to share my business card. Contact information is on the website, so you can get in touch with me anytime you want. So, thank you guys. Appreciate it.